Hello everybody, dear friends, dear clients, dear astrology lovers. Here is Olga and I'm very happy to present you today my new video on a very interesting and a very useful subject, the synthetic and the highlighted sign, or signs rather in plural, how they are calculated and how they help us to understand better the core, the essence of somebody's character and of his astropsychological profile. I will share my screen with you and I will show you how I proceed in my calculations and in my analysis with the example of the birth chart of Leonardo DiCaprio. Actually, I have a second example for later, the chart of Julia Roberts. Let's define first briefly the most important parameters of the analysis of the birth chart. What we consider during this analysis. I would like just to mention that most people, especially those who are very far from astrology, the only thing that they know about them, their astrological profile, is their solar or sun sign. For example, the person, since she knows that she's born on November 11th, she knows that she's a Scorpio. Her sign is a Scorpio. But what does it mean, her sign? This is much more complicated than that. It's much more complex. The solar sign is very small and not the most important aspect of the birth chart, at least for me. Let's take off the time of birth. Don't consider for the moment the rising sign and the houses, because actually today we will not talk about the houses. The birth chart without the time of birth is called cosmogram. Well, this is at least the terminology that we use in Russian. Cosmogramma. And if you look at the chart in this way, we see the zodiacal circle, the wheel, and the position of the planets in signs. I always start the chart using the Aries at 3 o'clock if it was a clock, and I don't change the position of the wheel. It means that the rising sign, the ascendant, will walk around depending on the time of birth of the person. Some astrologers put the software in the way that they have the rising sign on the right here at 3 o'clock. I'm used to this position, so the question of organization of the look, it doesn't influence the results of the calculations or of the analysis. So what we consider here, the position of the planets in signs of the planets from the Sun to Pluto, all the fictitious points, the North Node Rahu, the South Node Ketu, the Lilith, the Black Moon, Selena, the White Moon, Chiron, and there are many other asteroids and fictitious points, but let's limit ourselves to these listed in this list for the moment. So the position of planets, the planets and the fictitious points in signs, and yes, of course in houses, if we consider the time, but without the houses. The aspects between the planets that are for me very more important than the position of the planets in signs. Regarding the zodiacal circle, the wheel, we consider the position of the planets in the southern and the northern hemisphere, in the eastern and the western hemisphere. Please pay attention. We don't talk here about the hemispheres, right, left, bottom, above, regarding the rising sign, the ascendant. No, regarding the position of the wheel, considering the starting point of calculation, the 0 degrees of Aries. Okay? So, because we can see that in Leonardo's chart, the concentration of planets is in the northern hemisphere and western. This will be reflected also in the table I will show you later. Now, talking about the position of the planets in the signs of the zodiac. Here also we have to mention we have to point out the main points of classification of the signs, which are the elements, the crosses or modalities, and polarity, male and female signs. All of us, we know that the 12 zodiacal signs belong to 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. We know that classification very well. And another point of classification is the crosses or modalities. What is the particularity of this classification? If the elements define the potential characteristics, describe the static features, the constant particularities of the character and the temperament, then the modalities define the dynamic characteristics, the form of behavior, the life strategy initially present, the mode of vital evolution, the dynamic of psychology. The cardinal cross symbolizes the young active origin, and the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. The fixed cross symbolizes the yin, passive origin, and the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And finally, the mutable cross symbolizes the Den origin, and Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces are mutable signs. The third point of classification of the zodiac signs is the principle of polarity, which implies that the odd signs, the air and the fire signs, which are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius, are masculine, and the even signs are feminine: Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Pisces, which represent earth and water signs. Going back to Leonardo's chart, here is the document that presents the synthesis of the analysis of his chart. The results of the calculations, different calculations, is presented in the form of diagrams, which is very easy and useful to use and to understand, easy to understand. Now, here we have the data, the position of the planets and the fictitious points in the degrees of the signs, in the degrees of the houses, etc. These diagrams present the dominating hemisphere that I mentioned before. So in his case, the northern hemisphere is dominating alongside with the left or western hemisphere. But what we are interested in, what is the most important for us in our today's analysis, is the position of the signs in the elements and in the crosses. Well, here you have the thirds and the quadrants, so there are different approaches of the analysis of the different elements of the chart. Let's put this aside. What we have to focus on is the crosses and the elements. But let's start with the highlighted sign. What is a highlighted sign? Look at this table, please. What do we do here? We give points or credits to each planet. Of course, the Sun and the Moon receive each one 3 points because these two are the most important planets. Mercury, Venus, Mars receive 1.5 points, and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto receive 1 point. The fictitious points receive less than 1 point. So what do we do? This is a very simple analysis. We calculate the total of the points for each sign. So for example, 3 credits, 3 points for the Sun in Scorpio means that we put here 3. For Libra, we have 3 points corresponding to the Moon and 1.5 points corresponding to Mercury. For Scorpio, we have 1 point corresponding to Venus and 1.5 points, corresponding to Mars, etc. So we can see here clearly that the two dominating, let's call them like this, dominating signs are Libra and Scorpio, and these results are represented, are shown in the diagram of the highlighted sign or signs, and where we see that the sign that dominates is Libra, And in the second place, we see the Scorpio. Well, in this case, when the difference is very small, I would point out, I will underline 2 highlighted signs. But all of us, we know that Leonardo's solar sign is Scorpio. And this is the first moment when the person can be surprised. How come Libra, if the person has no idea about the moon and the other planets, she will say, okay, my highlighted sign is Libra, but how come if I am born on 11th of November? Well, that happens every day with my clients, which discover the highlighted sign, which is different from their solar sign. Sometimes there is coincidence that they are the same, the highlighted and the solar. But once again, we can see clearly here that Leo has Venus, Sun, Mars in Scorpio, but in Libra he has also 3 planets. Oh, sorry, 4. He has 4 because it's on the border. Mercury, Uranus, Moon, and Pluto. So his highlighted is Libra. So I repeat quickly. The calculation of the highlighted sign is based on the position of the planets in signs. And the sign that gains the maximal total of the points becomes the highlighted sign, even though it can be different from the solar sign. Look at this table. You remember those graphs in the second page of my document? Hemispheres, elements, crosses, thirds, quadrants. These are the results in the form of diagrams of these calculations. So what is the dominating hemisphere? We just put attributing in the same way the points, the credits to the planets. We introduce these numbers in the table, and we have the total of the dominating hemisphere, element, cross, thirds, quadrant. What we are interested in is the table of the elements and the crosses. The Sun is in Scorpio, which is fixed water sign. So we put 3 points into the water column and 3 points into the fixed cross column. Moon is in Libra in his chart, and Libra is a cardinal air sign. So we enter 3 points in the column of air and 3 points in the column of cardinal cross. Let's take something different from Scorpio and Libra. Jupiter, where is Jupiter? Jupiter is in Pisces. Saturn is in Cancer. Pisces is a mutable water sign. So that means that 1 point from Jupiter goes for water and 1 point goes for mutable cross. Saturn is in Cancer, which is cardinal water, so 1 point for cardinal cross and 1 point for water. What do we see in the end? That water gains 8 points as the total. Air gains 7.7 and 0 Earth, 2.6 fire element, dominating element. What about crosses? Cardinal cross gains the maximum of points 8.7. So what do we get in the end? The dominating cross, which is cardinal in his case, and the dominating element, which is water in the end, gives us the sign of Cancer, because the cardinal water is Cancer. His air element is not far from the dominating water, 7.7. It's almost 8. So in this case, I would consider the cardinal air, which is Libra, as the second synthetic sign. So you see, what is interesting with the example of Leo's chart is that Libra is both the synthetic and the highlighted sign. Well, in the highlight, it takes the first place. In the synthetic, it takes the second place. Okay, but Scorpio has nothing to do here. Whereas the Scorpio is his second highlighted in terms of percentage, right? And Scorpio is his solar sign. So this example helps us to understand why some people say that I don't feel myself like the solar sign, even that the person, even that the person has, for example, the same ascendant, let's say born Scorpio, solar Scorpio, rising Scorpio, and let's say the moon Cancer in Cancer, for example. But after the calculation of the synthetic sign, since we consider the dominating cross, the sign that comes out in the end has sometimes nothing to do with the moon sign, the sun sign, the rising. It can be figured out only at the end of these calculations. Especially, it's fascinating when, in the case when the client, the person, has not a doesn't have any single planet in this sign. Well, Leo has Saturn, but I mean, this is not the personal planet, not like Venus, Mars. So sometimes this synthetic sign is the same as the highlighted and the same as the solar. It happens, but sometimes, and most often, I noticed, by the way, they are not the same. Now let's consider the second example, the chart of Julia Roberts. So this is the birth data. Even though we don't need the time here, let's go directly to the document. What about the highlighted? The Sun 3 points in Scorpio, Mercury Scorpio 1.5 points, Neptune 1 point in Scorpio 5.5. So the Scorpio is dominating, so the highlighted is Scorpio, which is the same as the solar. Because the moon is in Leo, and Leo has only one planet moon, but moon has 3 points. So look, Virgo is not far. She has 4 planets in Virgo: Venus, Jupiter, Uranus, and Pluto. But since we accord them less points than to the moon, the total is 4.5, not far from 3 points corresponding to Leo, to the total for Leo. So here we can see the result in the diagram, which is, of course, Scorpio, 30% of Scorpio, and the Virgo is just behind. So water and earth elements dominating. So her highlighted signs are Scorpio and Virgo. What about the synthetic? Well, look how many planets she has in the fixed cross. Sun, Moon, and Mercury already give her 7 points because they are in Scorpio, which is a fixed water. And this is it's a major domination, and it should be heavy as a combination. 4 planets in Scorpio, and the dominating element is Earth with 6.6%. The water is behind, not far, but still, we said that we try to figure out only one dominating element or cross. And what do we receive? What do we get in the end? Look at this. Fixed Earth is Taurus. So not even the sign from the highlighted that could have, some percentage of the general picture. She has only 3% of Taurus in the highlighted signs. So the synthetic sign of the chart of Julia Roberts, which is based on the dominating fixed cross and the dominating earth element of her chart, is a fascinating example because the sign of Taurus, she doesn't have any single planet in the sign of Taurus. She has only the black moon Lilith in Taurus, and in these calculations we give very small percentage to she doesn't have any weight, the fictitious point. We have to focus on the planets, and most of all on the first 5, because they give a lot of, they have a lot of points. They are heavier. They are more important. So Taurus in the highlighted has only 3%, and you see she doesn't, her highlighted and the synthetic, they don't correspond at all. There is no, well, you will say highlighted Virgo is it's Earth, yes, but still it's not the same sign. It's the same element, but not the same cross. So this is how the how it works. This calculation. I provide any new client with this table. I can also, if the client wants, provide the table for any other person, for the partner or for the children, or for more than one partner. So if you order services with me, don't forget, because me, I never, in any case, I don't forget, but remind me that I have to give you your screenshot of your birth chart and this table with the diagrams that will allow you to know your highlighted and your synthetic signs. Now the question is, what is the difference between two types of signs, the synthetic and the highlighted? Yes, this is the question that I've been asked, and that I'm asking to myself also, because it's not easy to answer this question, but there is a difference. You can imagine that two different approaches and calculations impose the difference in the interpretation and of its role in the analysis of the chart. I would say that the highlighted sign or signs will determine the real behavior of the person, which she is aware of herself, and especially that other people are aware of. For example, if the person has the moon in Leo and Mars in Leo, even though the solar sign is different and other than Leo, the person will be extremely demonstrating and drama queen, emotionally explosive, and very active in undertaking personal initiative, in undertaking action, because Mars symbolizes the personal initiative. So this Leo side will be very visible. It will be like on the surface. The people would think of this person that her solar sign is Leo. Well, of course, the everyday consciousness, the superficial consciousness that I call, the way I call it, the manners of the everyday behavior with other people, especially during the first contact with new people, is described by the ascendant, the rising sign. But nevertheless, if the moon and the Mars are in the fire sign, any fire, but let's take Leo as an example I took before, people will notice that. It will make the behavior of the person will, especially emotional reactions and the way she acts, the way she works on the achieving of her objects, goals. People will notice in her behavior the characteristics of the Leo fire, of the fire, which is a fire sign. I'll give you another example. If the person has the moon in Pisces and Mercury in Pisces, she will be an introvert, emotionally vulnerable, and with the Mercury in Pisces, the person will be a big dreamer. She will think more and she will talk less, and it will be evident for other people. Especially if the person has another planet in another water sign. So this water dominating or highlighted water element will be, once again, repeat myself, very evident in the way she will behave, evident for other people and also for herself. For example, me, I know that I have moon in Leo because, I see how I react. I feel this blood pressure coming up when somebody gets on my nerves. I would... what about the synthetic sign? I would use the characteristics of the synthetic sign in our example Libra to the description of the core of the personality of the person. And these characteristics are not visible, are not evident for the person herself and for other people who deal with this person every day. If you take, I would compare that with the perfume that has a certain number of ingredients, of the flavors, and what we call the core flavor, the main or the major flavor that stays in the end after a certain time, when the other flavors, they disappear, and we can still recognize the core, the main flavor of the perfume. So this is my this is my idea. This is how I see the subject. What could we do with these synthetic and highlighted signs? What do I do personally with them? First of all, I use the interpretation of the synthetic and the highlighted signs in the analysis of the career choice. Because there is description of the possible activities, professional activities and social activities also, that suit for particular element, for fire elements, for the sign of, for water signs, for air signs, earth signs, and for each sign, being, if you want to be more precise. So I will never suggest possible areas of professional activity for a sign which corresponds only to the solar sign, because it makes no sense. As we could see in the examples before, the synthetic and the highlighted sign can be different from the solar. Sometimes it's the same, so it's better. Maybe it's easy to for the person to accept her synthetic sign. So I use this interpretation for the choice of areas of professional activity, and also for the compatibility, for the analysis of the compatibility between two partners. For example, if one partner has the dominating, even before to mention the synthetic and the highlighted, if one partner has the dominating fire element, and the other partner has the dominating water element, they will be very different in their lifestyle, in their needs, in their general, dynamics and the energy. Now, of course, it's much complicated than that. We have to consider in the analysis of the compatibility the position of Venus's, the Moon in the man's chart, and Mars in the woman's chart, and the seventh house, the descendant. Its projection on the chart of the other partner. But for me, this is the first parameter that I pay attention to. It may look very general, a little bit vague, but still it gives additional information. We can take it as an additional information. But we have to consider this, because, for example, if I have fire and air that dominates my chart, and the other person, even if I like her for some reason, has the dominating water element, in spite of the attraction in the beginning, with the time I will consider that I'm not patient enough, to wait for her response, for her decision, and blah, 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 etc. So in the beginning, yes, the attraction may exist, may appear very quickly. But if you talk about long-term interaction, long-term relationship, if there is no compatibility between the dominating elements of the two people, I hardly see the possibility of something constructive on long term. This is the second point. How else do I use the synthetic and the highlighted signs? I consider the cycles of the planets' rulers of the synthetic and the highlighted sign in the astrological predictions. I will explain myself now. All of us, we know that there are 5 major techniques in astrological predictions: directions, progressions, solar returns or solar revolutions, eclipses, and transits. When we try to predict the tendency of the future of the person, we have to use all of them, the 5 of them. We have to consider all of them. We cannot use just only one, because it's a complex analysis of all the levels of the reality, future reality, emotional states, physical events, effects that provoke the realization of this or that event. It's a very complicated, very complex process, and very fascinating. Let's get back to the chart of Leonardo. His synthetic sign is a cardinal water, which is Cancer. The ruler of Cancer is the moon. So the moon has, as any planet, has a small average and a big cycle. All of us, we know the small cycles, which are 29 and a half days. Well, this is a little bit, I will not comment on this. I mean, maybe in another video, that the small cycle for men is a little bit different, as well as the average cycle for women and men are also different. Since the moon is the fastest planet of the solar system, we consider the big cycle of the moon. Whereas if we take the ruler of the synthetic sign, which is a slower planet, we will take the average cycle, or sometimes even a small cycle, because the big cycle will be huge, and it will make no sense to apply this cycle to the analysis. Now, what happens here? So the big cycle of the moon is 19 years. So in this table we can see that if we apply the principle of the rhythm of the big cycle of the moon, which is 19 years, we can see that in the end of each cycle, the person at the age of 19, 38, 77, the person will experience not very favorable circumstances, critical situation, emotional difficulties, and there are also intermediate phases, not only the end of the cycle. The period of life that we see in the green lines correspond to favorable, harmonious, constructive moments in the life of the person. And if these periods of life are confirmed by positive progression, directions, transits, it will allow us to get the very entire picture of the astrological predictions, and we will call it the main pulse, the main rhythm of the destiny of the person. So we cannot just ignore these numbers, and maybe it's not the first thing that I look at, but I always add it as a point number 6 in the list of astrological predictions. So yes, I was saying that I consider the cycles of the rulers of the synthetic and the highlighted signs of the both. So for example, the highlighted sign of Leonardo was Libra, and its ruler is Venus, and the average cycle of Venus is 8 years. The big 64, it influences the events on the level of history, world history and world politics, so it doesn't have any impact on the life of one person. So that's why we consider the average cycle of Venus, if the Venus is the ruler of the synthetic sign. At the age indicated during the year indicated in the red line, the person may expect some events happening, important events, most probably negative events, but not obligatory accidents or tragedies. It's not about this. It's about obstacles and difficulties and potentially delays, critical moments when we have to reconsider our positions, for example, or to change something. And when we change something in our lives, it implies that we give up to something that is already worn out and old in order to go forward and experience new things, right? We have to give up to the old ties and material objects and emotional ties. So it's not about the red lines. It's not about the years when the person will lose a member of the family or will have a car accident. No, it's not. It's more. It's about the context, about the potential of the situation. Critical moments always brings crisis, always brings changes, and the changes. Crisis make us grow, and the changes moves us forward. When everything is okay, we don't even think about, when we only laugh, we don't really think about how to resolve an issue or problem, because we don't experience a problem at the present moment. So, as I said, this is the information that I use in addition to the 5 methods of prognostics, of the predictions. And this I can also, any new client I will provide with this table after having defined the synthetic and the highlighted sign shown in the previous Excel table. I will provide the client with the table of the cycles of the ruler of his highlighted and synthetic sign. So this is all for today. I sincerely hope that you found this information useful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me to ask additional questions, or if you didn't understand something, I try to be as much clear as I could. And I wish you all the best, and I just want to remind you that the spiritual perfection gives power of the physical world. Thank you very much for your attention, and hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.